How about them dogs? Go dogs, go dogs, go dogs, go dogs. Sit. How about them dogs? Go dogs, go dogs, go dogs, go dogs. Sit.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back. It is Dog Talk with your host, Holden. I'm so glad to have you guys here tonight as we get geared back up for another season of football. Another season of Georgia football is already here. We're a week away at this point, essentially. It is Thursday night. This is when I'm going to start dropping these live videos, basically. So you guys, anytime you want to check in, this is generally when I'm going to start having these the call-in shows and everything. Not doing it this week. Obviously, we don't have a game this week, so I'm going to kind of keep that really centric around when we actually have football being played. We do have some games this weekend. We're going to get to a lot of this stuff kind of coming up, but just wanted to jump on real quick and kind of run through a bunch of stuff that we haven't talked about yet. I mean, football season is starting here in, I don't know, 24 hours, basically. I think we've got some games that'll be getting started. Actually, I guess it's a little bit later than that. But again, glad to have you guys here and looking forward to getting back up and back rolling, doing some of this live stuff and also getting some calls and all that good stuff going here in the weeks to come. So again, glad to be with you guys. If you don't know who I am, my name is Holden, and we're talking about Georgia football the entire season. This is 5th, 6th season. I can't remember now, to be honest with you, that we've been doing this, but excited to get it to you and started. I'm going to be looking back and forth here, trying to kind of get engaged with everything that's going on, because I do this by myself. If you've ever watched or listened to the show, any podcast form, you can find it on pretty much any platform. It's out there. And then obviously watching on YouTube as well is another way too. But I'm a one-man show. I've got 56,000 things going on and running through my head at the same time, so bear with me if things get a little bit crazy out here. But anyways, let's kind of dive into it. I want to start with some news and notes. We're going to talk about the AP poll, which doesn't really matter, but it's still something to talk about here as we get into the season. I'm going to talk about injuries, not really much to talk about there. And then we're going to get into the 2025 season, kind of some of the stuff that we're expecting coming into the season, what we think that Georgia can do throughout this season. Also looking around, obviously, the SEC and beyond and to the rest of the country as well, because there's a lot of stuff going on. So a lot to talk about. We'll kind of give some predictions and stuff like that. If you guys have listened or watched long enough, you know that Hunter usually comes on with me. We had a little bit of off-season conversation just a couple of weeks ago when we recorded. Actually, it's probably been longer than that now. And I'll try to get him on as well and kind of talk with him about a few different things, because it's fun to pick his brain, see kind of what he thinks about Georgia and what he thinks they'll do throughout the season too. So we'll kind of be prepared for that as we go. But let's kind of dive into the first thing. Something I saw that came up earlier today is the SEC is going to be moving to that 9-game SEC conference schedule. For years now, we've been playing 8. For years, multiple other conferences have fussed about the fact that the SEC does not play a 9-game conference schedule like many of the other Big Ten, I guess ACCs in that same book, they do. So they feel like maybe the SEC should do that. To me personally, just looking at it, right off the bat, is the SEC is already hard enough playing 8 games. A lot of times we kind of eat each other alive. That happened a little bit last year throughout the season for all SEC teams. Adding another one of those games into the season is going to do nothing but more of that to me. This season in particular, kind of coming in, I've heard this before, and I also kind of agree with this, that this has the potential of being like a 2007 kind of a college football season where you have some top dogs that are there that are really good teams, and you've got some other teams that are in the middle that can take those top dogs out, even though they may not necessarily be the top dog at the end of the season. Not to continually use top dog in this, but we're going to talk that way in it. But we are moving to that 9-game schedule next season. Here's kind of what the SEC put out. I guess I could have just put this up on the screen, but I didn't think that far ahead. So we're going to continue having the single standing non-divisional structure. So right now, East and West, that's still out of the picture. Haven't talked about doing anything different than that. I know when we first started talking about the way that everything was last season, we talked about these pods. I don't know what the conversation is in that, but I know at least in 2026, that won't be a thing. That's not something that we have to worry about next year. Still looks like the top 2 teams are going to be the teams that will be playing for the SEC championship game. So that's what we know, at least in 2026. Again, nothing's changing this year. Everything is exactly the same this year. Obviously, schedules have been out. You know who you're playing. We'll get that one extra game. the question comes, okay, well, if we're playing that extra game, what happens with some of these big rivalry games? Are those what disappears? Or what happens with these teams that you play every year? Let's take a Georgia, Florida. That's a big rivalry game, obviously, but this is also a game that gets played every year. Auburn, Alabama, huge rivalry game. It's the end of the season. Tennessee, Alabama, I know that's another big one as well. And Georgia has even had the rivalry against Tennessee. Do these games that Georgia and Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, all these teams have played year in and year out, do they still exist or do they go away? Well, they answered that. Each school is going to have 3 annual opponents focused on maintaining those traditional rivalries. So those games that you are traditionally used to and accustomed to seeing, they're still going to be there. That kind of accounts for that. All of the remaining 6 games that'll be played are going to be on a rotation. So that means every team will play everybody in the SEC. And the way they line this up is basically at least once every 2 years, you're going to play everybody in the conference. And having that home and away will happen within 4 years. So if you're playing everybody, these 9 teams, which would be that way, these 9 teams this year, and then we're going to play those 9 next year. Okay, it's pretty simple. You've gone through the entire gamut of what is the SEC. So that means within 4 years, you will have had that home and away with everybody in the league. Because obviously this year, let's say Texas comes to us. Last year we went to them. Okay, the home and home between those two, it's already done and over with. I doubt you see a Texas on the schedule. I doubt you see an Alabama on the schedule next season, mainly because if that's the way they're taking this, I don't know if they're taking this from 2026 on or if they're taking this from what's happened now and moving forward. We'll see. But to me, at least, hey, well, some of these games have already kind of happened. Those home and homes or home and aways have already happened. So I don't know exactly how they're going to structure that. We'll see when we get into it next year. But that means that these teams that don't ever play, such as a Georgia at Texas A&M or vice versa, such as, there's a lot of these games that never really get played. Those will happen now. And within 4 years, everybody will have had that opportunity to play somewhere and that team come back to you as well. So kind of an interesting thing to hear out of the SEC, something that we'll kind of keep an eye on and look forward to as well. Getting into next year, some of the other stuff I did want to talk about was obviously Georgia being ranked 5th in the AP poll. This came out a couple of weeks ago, so this is kind of old news for you guys, but new stuff for me to talk about at least because I hadn't talked to you guys about anything. So we're going to talk about it. Again, the rankings at this point in time, they don't matter. I think a lot of it is, one, you have to have something to talk about. That's probably the biggest thing. But then they want some kind of a structure so that way when the season starts, they can move teams where they feel like they should be fit. Instead of it being nobody's ranked and we just throw a ranking system up there that everybody's going to get mad at anyways because of bias or whatever you think about whoever it is that puts these polls out. That is, just kind of part of it. So do I 100% agree with the rankings that come out to start the season? Nah, not necessarily, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. Win all the football games, and at the end of the year, when the main stuff starts coming out, the college football playoffs nearing the end of the season, that's when we'll really worry about it because that's when it truly matters. But Georgia does come in at least preseason ranked 5th in the AP poll and 4th in the coaches. Your top 5 is Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia. And what I want to do real quick, I'm just going to kind of run through them. We're going to run through this top 25, and I kind of want to go through and just look at who I'm thinking too high and too low. And some of this I'm going to say, to be honest with you, some of these teams year in and year out get ranked really high and they never pan out that way. And then some of these teams get ranked really low and they're always one of the better teams in the country. Some of these teams come out of nowhere. Obviously, that happens too, which is fun to see. But I'm going to run through them real quick, and we're just going to kind of do some too highs, too lows. If you guys are watching, listening out there, in the comments, put it in there. Tell me what you guys think. So, obviously, again, you got Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia. That's the start. That's the start right here. We're going to start with just the top 5. Texas being at number 1, I don't care. I don't mind it. I think Texas is a really good football team. I think they have an opportunity to have a very, very good season this year. Obviously, they had a good season last year. Potentially could be doing that same exact thing this season as well. So them being at the top doesn't necessarily surprise me. Penn State, I'm going to go ahead and say it too high at least on my list. And that's just because I want to see you win it. I want to see you win the big games. And then I would love to see you up there too, because when you get to 2 and then you play the big games and you lose, you never stay there. You never end up on that page once you get to the end of the season. So a little high for me. Again, I think they have the potential of having a really good season too, but at least starting the season, a little high. Again, these don't matter. This is just something to talk about. Ohio State, surprisingly to me, I don't necessarily like admitting it too low. I don't think Ohio State is the third best team in the country. I think they're potentially still the number one team in the country, if not at least second. So I'd bump them up a little bit, but the coaches poll kind of has it a little bit closer to what I would think. And the coaches poll is Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia. Again, Penn State, I just don't think starting season, will they be the top 5 team in the country at the end of the season? Don't necessarily know. That's kind of how, if I'm judging it, how I would rank things starting the season is, what do I think this season's going to end? How do I think this season, if you're predicting it, who's going to be at the top, the bottom? That's how I would do a ranking to start the season if you're going to do it that way, and see how close you can get it to being what it is at the end. Obviously, it's going to fluctuate throughout the season because even some of these teams that'll be in the top 5 at the end of the season could have 1-2 losses. So if that happens, obviously, that's going to be a little bit different. But Clemson at 4, again, this one I don't really know. I've heard a lot of murmuring about how good Clemson's going to be this year, how easy the ACC, they should just kind of cakewalk through the ACC this year. You got an FSU that maybe they're on an uprising this year. I mean, it can't get much worse than it did last year after how well of a season they had a couple of years ago, unfortunately for them. But then you have Miami. Miami's the other team that might compete for that in the ACC. Other than that, I just don't see North Carolina really being that, even though you get a new coach there, obviously, in Bill Belichick. I don't see that being something that in year one is going to translate to being an ACC champion just that quickly. Could be wrong. Again, I just don't really know how I feel about Clemson being at 4, not necessarily because they're above Georgia, but mainly because the past couple of years that Georgia has faced off against Clemson, Georgia's had that number. So while we're giving them the nod ahead of it, not sure. So I'm going to say just a little too high, but I do think they're going to be a very, very good team this year. Georgia at 5. Obviously, with kind of what I've said about Penn State and as well as Clemson, I think Georgia is one of the top 3 teams in the country starting the season. We'll see if they hold on to that throughout the rest of the season. A lot of football, obviously, to be played in this. I think Georgia's a little low to be at 5, but I don't mind it. Again, these don't matter. Notre Dame at 6. I'm always going to say this, and this is kind of sad and a little bit, I don't really know the word I want to use to say. Notre Dame every year seems to be put in a top 10 situation starting the season, and they never end there except for last year. Last year, they had an incredible season. Obviously, they beat us in the playoffs, in the first round of the playoffs, so I can't have a lot of fuss about how Notre Dame is obviously coming into this season, especially considering how well they played last year, how good they still expect them to be this year. So because of that, I'm going to say Notre Dame's okay there at 6. Then we go down to Oregon. Oregon, I'm kind of curious about. Oregon did get 1 vote, I think, in the AP poll for first place. This one is, again, just kind of curious to me. I don't know that. I feel like this is going to be a little bit more of a step back season for Oregon. Oregon, pretty good team last year, put some things together, obviously. But I don't know if this is a season where they really put it all back together to where we're pushing hard for a playoff and even deeper into a playoff run. So Oregon, don't mind them there at 7, but I'd probably say a little high for my taste. Alabama at 8, don't necessarily mind that either. Again, I think this is kind of another one of the seasons, kind of similar to last year, that Alabama's still got some things to figure out. They obviously have weapons on offense as well as defense. You're kind of jumping in with a quarterback this year that's going to have to figure things out that I think is going to be a lot different than what it's been in the past couple of years for Alabama. Does that translate well onto the field? It has in the past, but I don't know if that same thing happens this season. Alabama at 8. Again, you start to kind of get into this point where the teams that you have below this margin is where, it could really go either way for a lot of teams. So Alabama, don't necessarily mind there at 8. LSU at 9. This is the thing about LSU. I like Alabama or LSU at 9. I don't mind that at all. And here's kind of my point on this. LSU has a very, very talented football team this year. They've got great wideouts. They've obviously got a good defense. They've got a great quarterback. Here's the thing, though. Until your coach wins the big games, until your coach is putting you in positions to where you can win and win at a high rate and push yourself into the playoffs, I don't believe in you. And we'll see if that happens this year. I can obviously eat crow on this. I'm going to say LSU a little too high starting the season right there. Again, things could change. Miami at 10, too high. I'm just going to say it just right there. And that has nothing to do with Carson Beck whatsoever. So don't think that just because it's a Georgia channel. Arizona State, think they're going to be okay. Obviously they've lost some players. 11, again, I think is a little too high for them, but we'll see. Illinois at 12, too high. South Carolina at 13. I kind of like it there. I think Lenore Sailors has a great chance to be a really good football player. He's already a really good football player, even elite, and possibly one of the top candidates when it comes to NFL draft potentially next season. But you kind of lost some things. You lost some weapons outside there that kind of helped him out in that way. But I don't necessarily mind them at the 13th spot. I still think they're going to be a really good football team this year. Michigan at 14, don't really know, to be honest with you. I don't have a lot of insight on what Michigan's going to be this year, but I will say I feel like it's just a tad too high. Florida at 15. I think this is a little high too. Again, some of that's just the bias of being a Georgia fan and not really caring anything for Florida, but here's the thing. I think Florida can do one of two things. I think DJ Lagway is a very, very good quarterback. Can he stay healthy is the first thing. I don't know that he's even necessarily healthy coming into this season, so that's a question. But can he stay healthy? Here's the other thing. You got to have more than one player. They've got some other players with them, but you have to have more than one to actually be able to do something in the season. I could very well see Florida being a 9-3, possibly even a 10-2 football team somehow at the end of the season, considering that schedule. That's immaculate to go 10-2 in that. But I could also see them fall right back, go 6-6, 7-5, maybe. Not 100% sure on that, but I'm going to say that's a little too high for me. SMU at 16, I like this. I actually think SMU is a little low on this. Kansas State 17. We're going to get to see that this week. They're playing in week 0 against Iowa State, top 25 matchup. We get to see in the first week here on Saturday coming up. Excited to see that. I don't mind 17. I think 17 is pretty good. Oklahoma at 18. Here's the thing. Oklahoma kind of ended the season on a fairly decent note. Obviously beating Alabama at one point last season, but it's everything. I want to see everything come together. A lot of it really depends on the quarterback situation as well there at Oklahoma to determine, does this actually matter in the end when they start this season? Is that going to pan out for them to even be in the top 25? Not really sure. Texas A&M, again, another team that every year we rank really high. They start the season, they're ranked really high. They look really good. And then a lot of times it just doesn't seem to really reciprocate that. So I'm going to say a little too high for Texas A&M at 19. I hope they end up there. I hope they're in the top 25 by the time they get to the end of the season, but I can't guarantee that that's necessarily going to happen. Indiana at 20. I like that there. Ole Miss 21, I think is a little low. Obviously, you're rebuilding some things there at Ole Miss, but I think Ole Miss is still a really good football team, potentially another 10-2, 9-3 kind of season. I think 21 is a little low for that. Iowa State at 22, don't mind that. Texas Tech at 23, little low for me. I think Texas Tech is a better football team than that this year. Tennessee at 24. It's really going to depend on what happens with the quarterback situation, to be honest with you. Can the quarterback produce for Tennessee? That's going to be the deciding factor of should they actually be a little higher. If he plays well, I think that's a really low ranking for them at 24. But again, the SEC this year, I feel like it's that 07 kind of season where you have teams that are really good, teams that can completely come out and surprise anybody. But I also think that they could turn around and just not be very good at all. But the SEC, I think, is going to eat itself alive this year, to be honest with you. I really feel like that's potentially what's going to happen. We'll see Boise State at 25. Don't really care, to be honest with you. Not sure what Boise's doing. Hadn't really stared at what Boise's got coming into the 2025 season, to be honest with you. So that's at least the preseason rankings of 2 highs and 2 lows. Some of the injury updates don't really have anything for you kind of coming into the season. Kirby did say that this is about the healthiest that things have ever been coming into it. Let me knock on wood right there. Don't want to jinx anything as we're kind of coming out of fall camp, getting ready for the start of the season next week, excuse me. He did also mention how young this team is, and we're going to have to lean on that. We're going to have to lean on that young talent that's coming in this year between freshmen as well as a lot of transfers. We got some guys that are coming in this season. I'm excited to see what they can do and really looking forward to what we've got coming into this season. And speaking of which, let's kind of jump in now. I want to look at Georgia's season. We're going to kind of run through the entire schedule, basically. We're going to do some predictions on the season. I also want to look at some guys that I think are going to be impact players for this season as well. We're going to talk about a couple of these transfers, and then let's see what else we got. Just kind of running through a couple of the rooms that I think can be impactful before we jump into some of the games that are already going to be happening, obviously, this weekend coming up, because it's technically week 0, which is kind of crazy to think about, to be honest with you, because I feel like it shouldn't already be here, but it also feels like it should have been here 3 months ago, right? So I'm gonna get the schedule pulled up for us here. I should have already had this pulled up. There we go. We'll get it pulled up and we'll run through it really quickly. Obviously, we're starting the season off against Marshall at home. That's what's happening next week. Excited for that. Looking forward to the start of the season. We've already run through the schedule, just going basically game by game and talking about each one game by game. So I'm not going to do that with you guys again here. But what we are going to do is I'm going to just kind of pinpoint each game as we walk through this schedule. And we're going to just do our predictions that way. That'll be the simplest. All right, Marshall, we're going to start the season against Marshall at home again. I think this is a great way to start the season. The past few years, it's kind of tough when you look at how we've started what feels like the last 4 to 5 years. We had a few years back, we started with Oregon. Huge game to start the season. Big win to get started. We played Clemson. Really tight game. Go on to win that one as well. Then we played Clemson again. And a little bit different last season. So we've had some of those bigger marquee games starting the season, and we don't have that this year. No knock on Marshall, but just a little bit of a different start. Here's the good thing. Here's the thing I'm a little bit excited about this. Even though it's not necessarily like this marquee game, this huge game that everybody wants to watch, everybody's going to talk about, it is at least this. It's an opportunity for these young guys to get in, not only as starters. Some of these guys are going to have to lean on between freshmen, and then obviously you got young guys and sophomores, as well as these transfers that you're going to have to lean on as your starters, but your second, third string. An opportunity for you to start the season against a team that you should be able to put away pretty quickly and get a lot of guys reps and opportunities. So I'm going to give this obviously a win to start the season, and a great opportunity to kind of boost confidence, boost the morale getting into the start of this season. Then we followed that up the week after that, playing Austin Peay at home too. So you get a couple of home games to start the season. And again, to me, confidence boosters, not head boosters, not one that we can't walk through a door once we get done with, but ones that gets Gunnar Stockton in the game, gets him sped up to the way it's going to go against other players, not to the caliber of what SEC is going to be. That I'm not saying that at all, but at least gets them in kind of comfortably starting into the season. Then we head to Tennessee week 3, which is crazy, really. I mean, I've talked about this stuff all off season, but you and I haven't had this conversation, right? But Tennessee week 3 of the season kind of feels a little criminal. Not going to lie. Feel like this game's not supposed to happen for a long time. Like we should be in November before we play Tennessee is kind of what it feels like. At least October. At least mid to late October. Just my opinion. I don't know if I feel like that one should be before or after Florida. Probably before. So obviously not, maybe not November, but week 3 is crazy. It doesn't feel like it should be that early, but it is. I don't mind it. We're going there. It's going to be a 3:30 kick. Kind of a good thing for us, not a night game. Again, Tennessee's got some things they've got to figure out before we go and play them there. I think they'll do that. I think this is a really good potential to be a good game. But I think Georgia continues that. Here's the thing. Georgia has a lot this season between games against rivals that they've set a lot of records, or they've got long-standing records going on right now. Win streaks in a lot of different positions. There's pressure on what is Georgia football this season that I hope none of the players feel, because they shouldn't. You got a 31, 32 game win streak at home. That's one thing that you're going to be defending this year. You've beat Tennessee for what, last 8 seasons, it feels like, 8, 9, something like that. I don't remember how long Kirby's been there, but you've beat them for a lot and a long time. That's a big one. Obviously, Auburn is one of those. Florida is one of those. You have a lot of rivalry games that you're playing this season that you have been winning, and you've done it convincingly over the last few years. So I'm a little bit nervous about some of those things. I just hope none of that kind of gets back into the players' head. Nonetheless, let's kind of get back on track here with our predictions throughout the season. I think Georgia takes care of Tennessee at Tennessee. We get a bye week after that before Alabama comes to our house for what feels like the first time in a long time as well, mainly because it has been, but not necessarily the best outcome the last time they did come to our house. I'd love to change that. I would also love for that not to be where that winning streak at home ends. Couple of reasons for that. 1, because it's Alabama. 2, because it's Alabama. 3, because it's Alabama. Just my opinion, really. You got to get past it. That's all there is to it. You got to. And I think it happens this year. I think Georgia beats Alabama at home. It's going to be a really, really tough road to hoe, but I think it happens. I got confidence in it. It's your first night game of the season, first night game in Sanford. What a game for it to be a night game, too. bringing them in, get the dub, keep that streak alive. Keep it alive. All right, so we're 4-0 starting the season. We're at home against Kentucky a little bit after that. One good thing, I want to back up just for a second before Alabama comes to us. Here's something I was kind of looking at. I love looking at schedules like for us, but then I also love looking at that SEC helmet schedule and seeing what all the other SEC teams are doing. And then it's also very important for me who's playing who before they play us. And because I don't think that it's necessarily something to look over who they play after. Because here's the deal. Looking forward is a thing. When you're playing somebody and you start looking who they're playing after you, that game can be a slip-up game. But then also you can be so worried about that's coming that it messes everything up. And all of a sudden that game means nothing because you are losing the game that you're in right now. And I say that because of this. Alabama's going to play Wisconsin. I think they go on the road to Wisconsin. Long ways away. We both have a bye week before we play one another. That's very vital and important, I think, for both of us. We go to Tennessee, not very far, but we are going to Tennessee, opening up SEC play there to start the season. Not the start, but week 3. You get what I'm saying. Then we got a week off. They're headed to Wisconsin to play. Then they come home. They get a week off too. Then they have to come play us. Not a long road trip, obviously, from Tuscaloosa to Athens before that game gets started. But I think that matters. We're going to have a very tough game before this and a bye week. They're going to have, I don't think it's going to be as tough of a game. And yes, they opened the season with FSU. Again, I think FSU is going to be better than they were last year, but I still don't know if that's enough for them to win that game. I could be wrong. I think what's his name? Castellanos? I can't remember, to be honest with you. The quarterback now, I think is going to be a little bit better than the quarterback last year. Just my opinion. But I digress to getting back to the point here. Alabama and Georgia. Because do you guys know who Alabama plays after they play? After they play Georgia? Do you think it matters? This is the only reason I ask this. Georgia has struggled mightily with the Tide. We just have to be honest with ourselves. They've struggled. It's been tough from time to time. But we didn't lose to Vanderbilt. It's been a long time since we've done that. And they did that last year. And that's who they play after they play us. Is there the chance? Just hear me out. Is there the chance that they look past Georgia to the game they have after? I'm totally joking, because if you look past Georgia to Vanderbilt, which is a game that I'm not joking you, if I would lose to them, that would be a game I would circle on the calendar. I'm not saying they are, but they might be. But I don't think they're going to look past us. They go on the road, they play Wisconsin, they get a bye week, they come to Georgia, then they get to play Vandy, either the week after or 2 weeks after. I think it's the week after. But regardless, is what it is. I think Georgia gets over it. Georgia beats Alabama at home, September 27th, the night game. Then we get another game after that at home against Kentucky, a good one. Here's the one. I think we beat Kentucky. I think Kentucky's really, really bad this year. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think Kentucky's a very good team this year. I'm not saying it's like Mark Stoops gets fired worthy kind of season, but it could be. He's been there a long time. He's won a lot of games. I don't know what the threshold is for Kentucky to say, you got to get out of here. But that to me, it's always been a game, especially if we play in Lexington. Luckily, it's at home. It's always a game that we play and we like I get done and I go, what are we doing? Why is this? Why did we just play this football game and it was a 2-point? What are we doing? Why is this game close? It shouldn't be. Okay, I don't think that happens this year. I think Georgia beats the snot out of Kentucky. Just my opinion. Hope that's what happens. Let's move forward. Here's the trap game that everybody and their mama's talking about. It's Jordan-Hare, and it's always that way because anytime you go there and play this team, anything can happen, and that's very true. I don't know what to think about Auburn. I want Auburn to be good. Here's the first thing. I want Auburn to be a good football team. I really do. And I say that because when you play a team that you beat a lot all the time, don't lose to very often, and then you beat them up like really bad, you kind of get bored of that. Eventually, it's, like a cat just playing, and it gets so tired because the mouse don't want to run from it anymore, right? And I'm not saying that's what Georgia's been doing to Auburn because we've had some really close games. We've obviously had close games at home. 2 years ago when we played there, Brock Bowers, thank God he's still on the team at that time because without him, you probably don't win in Jordan-Hare that year. There is the potential that could be this kind of game this season, but everybody's hyping Auburn up to be a lot more this year than I really think they're going to be. I think Auburn can be a good team. I want them to be a good team. I don't think they're going to be this dark horse in the SEC that everybody keeps saying. Maybe I'm wrong about that. And if I am, hey, I'll admit to it. But I don't think that Auburn is going to be the team that everybody thinks they're going to be this year. Could be wrong. We're going to see. All I know is this. That dude likes to golf, don't he? Anyway, we're moving on. I think we beat Auburn, okay? We're undefeated as we go, and we get what I'm also going to say is a game that I think Georgia probably has circled on the schedule because Ole Miss came to us 2 years ago, and we throttled Ole Miss. It was fantastic. I couldn't believe just how bad we beat them, to be honest with you. And then we went to their house last year, and they beat us right back. And I was a little dumbfounded by it, mainly because you can't help but take what you've done in the past to a team and bring that into the picture this year. Even though it should have nothing to do with this year because this is a different football team that Georgia's putting on the field. It's also a different team that Ole Miss is going to be putting on the field. But I can't help look back 2 years ago and, Georgia took care of business. But then they didn't last year. This is kind of one of those games I'm like, things can get funky. We're in the middle of October. Hopefully we're not dealing with an injury-stricken team like we did last year. No excuses. Not going to make them. But I think it's a different outcome this season. I think Georgia at home defends their turf yet again. We're still rolling. We still got this going. Then we head into what in the world? Why do they want to change the name of the cocktail party? Why do they want to do this? I don't understand it. I mean, I get this playing in Atlanta situation that's about to happen and then playing, obviously, are they playing in Miami? I don't remember, to be honest with you. I feel like it's the Hard Rock Cafe, but I could be wrong. Not the cafe, but the stadium. Anyways, why do they want to try to change everything? There's nothing wrong with the name. It's okay. We're still going to call it. We're still going to call it the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, right? They're just doing it in Atlanta instead of Jacksonville. Here's the dealio. November 1st, 3:30, as always. Not CBS. We don't get all that this season. But I think Florida will be a little bit more improved this year. Everybody and their mama wanted to talk about the fact that if DJ Lagway had not got hurt last season, Georgia loses. I can't say that for certain. I do think that if he stayed healthy in that game, it's pretty tight to the end. Georgia potentially loses it, but they didn't. They didn't. It's on the paper. Georgia didn't lose that game. I think this is going to be another really tough fought game, to be honest with you. I don't know. I still have just this mixed emotion of, is Florida going to be that team that surprises a lot of people and goes 9-3, 10-2 and beats a lot of teams that people don't really expect? Or is this going to be a fall off where they go, no, that ain't it. This ain't it. And Billy's all of a sudden, kind of reeling, going, I don't know if I'm gonna have a job at the end of the season. I really don't know how to feel about him, to be honest with you. I feel like it could be a really good year for him, but again, I think a lot of that's kind of leading on the quarterback situation. Is he healthy? Can he stay healthy and play the way he looked like he did last year? Because if he does, that's a really good football team. I think this is going to be a good game, but I think Georgia continues to be undefeated in that. Then we move on. Obviously, there was a bye week before that after the Ole Miss game. Can't come at a better time when you get into that game. Then we go to Mississippi State. Again, Mississippi State, Kentucky, sad to say even Arkansas, I think are going to be some of the worst teams in the SEC this year. Mississippi State might be the worst team in the SEC this year, to be honest with you. Unfortunate to say, I think this is going to be a pretty easy game. Although, I don't remember if it was last year or the year before, Mississippi State put a lot more points up than I thought that they would have against us. Again, I can't bring that into this season, but you can't really help but to do that because that's all you really have to look at because we hadn't started playing this year. I digress anyway. I think Georgia wins that. Things are looking good. Here's the game that I probably have circled the most. There's 3 games on the schedule that I have circled that I'm very, very curious to see what's going to happen this year. It's Alabama. It's Ole Miss because of last year. And it's Texas. And this is a big one. Again, Texas is a really good football team. They potentially could win it all. There's a reason they have them ranked number 1 in both the coaches and the AP poll. Give or take a few things here and there. Here's my only little bit of a hang-up is when everybody wants to crown Arch Manning the greatest quarterback in all of history before he's truly played a starting position at Texas. Has he played in some games? Yep. I don't recall him starting a single game last season. I do recall him coming into the game against Georgia at Texas last year. He did some things with his feet. Wasn't a world beater. Again, I know it's a year later. He's learned a lot. He's learned the system. He's getting into it. He now gets to run it. Will that change things? Possibly. But again, you kind of have to look at all of the things that are around it. Where you're playing, who you're playing. What does that team look like when that gets there? Here's the hardest part about once you get late into the season is we don't know what these teams look like when that time happens. But here's the deal. Texas is a really good team. There's the potential that this is the season that Texas and not going to necessarily say just Arch, because apparently, his granddad has already said he's not going anywhere next year, so he'll still be here next year. But I think within this year or next year, I honestly think Texas might win the national championship. I think they're that good of a team. I think last year they had a really good team, and Georgia had their number. That was probably a big part of it. This year, I think Texas actually takes a slight step up from last year. Nothing against Quinn Ewers. I think Quinn Ewers was a great quarterback. I think Arch can be just as good as he was, which to me kind of gives them a little bit of an edge, but we're going to see. We're going to see what happens with that. Georgia late into the season, this gets tough. The road to hoe is obviously very tough, and I think this is also the toughest game on the schedule to Texas to me, and I think they're going to come ready for that. Obviously, game one at their house, we took care of business there. The SEC championship was a little bit different. That was a really close game. Obviously, it takes an overtime to win it, but Georgia wins that again. I would like to say that this could be potentially like a Georgia has their number, similar to how, hate to say this, but Alabama's had Georgia's. And maybe that happened. Maybe this is a rivalry that's being born that Kirby kind of takes over, and he's like, no, I'm the boss in this one. You're not beating us, especially at our house. I think that's going to be very, very difficult. Very, very difficult, because I think Sark is such a good schemer. I think when he gets in these games, he schemes very well against what you're doing. And the first time we played, nothing really changed. The second time we played, it's almost like they wanted to do that same thing they did the first time and just see if they can make it work, and the game was a lot closer. I'm not going to say that's necessarily because of Carson getting hurt or not. I think Gunner really showed us who he was in that second half, obviously, in that game. I don't know. I think this is a really tough game. If there's a game that Georgia loses this year and the streak comes to an end, I think it's this one. I think Georgia potentially 10-2, but I've got them 11-1 this season. This is the game, unfortunately, I think they fall to. And I would love to say, hey, until you beat us, I'm going to say that you're not going to. But this is a very, very difficult team right here. And I think they come in with their hair on fire when this game happens. And I think Georgia's a little bit tired by the time they get to this point. But we'll see. We'll see. This is the only one that I just want to be honest. I don't think Georgia is going to go 12-0 this year. This is a very, very, very difficult schedule. It's probably the hardest schedule Georgia's had in a while. And it's probably the greatest home schedule Georgia's had in a long, long time, too. Having some of these key, marquee, big games happening in Sanford is awesome. This being one of them. But unfortunately, I think this is where the kind of long-term streak kind of comes to an end. So Georgia at this point, I believe it's 9-1. So we move on. Charlotte at home the week after that. Kind of licking some wounds there, but I think Georgia wins that one. Why does it say that it's 10 days later? Oh, it's not. Why? Okay, that's weird. So my entire schedule that I'm looking at behind the screen here literally shows every game like normal. Like it says September 27th, October 4th, October 11th. You guys don't care. But then when you get to November 15th, it's got that. But then the very next date has November 22nd, 25. Why they put 25 at it? It's not even December to determine the difference between the two. But anyways, I digress. Charlotte, that's a win. And then Georgia Tech, I think this is another one where Georgia's not going to let what happened last year in that 7-8 overtime thriller that we had against Georgia Tech. I don't think Georgia's letting that happen this year. I don't think Kirby Smart's letting that happen this year. I think they come in with their heads on fire, especially because 2 weeks before that, a team is trying to take them out of the playoffs, trying to take them out of the SEC championship game. And this game won't matter in the SEC, but this game will matter in the state of Georgia. And Georgia, I think, comes in with their head on fire and ready to pound on Tech. So I got Georgia there essentially at that point, 11-1 by the end of the season. Go into the SEC championship game. I haven't really dialed in on how I think everybody in the SEC is going to do, but honestly, I think it's an SEC championship rematch between Georgia and Texas from last year, but also in this season, We had the rematch last year from the regular season, and I think we get it again this year, and I think it's going to be a big one that I think Georgia actually goes on and win in the SEC championship game. I've seen it happen before where Kirby, we get in the regular season games. Not that they don't matter, but when it matters most, Kirby has a really good kind of record at making it happen. And against some teams, maybe not, but we're gonna move on from that. Anyways, I think Georgia take care of business in the SEC championship game, propelling themselves obviously into the spotlight of the college football playoffs, which potentially changes next year. I'm going to wait until we really get a lot more information on what could be coming with that before we kind of dive in deeper as far as college football playoffs. I'm not going any deeper than that. SEC champions, you're in the college football playoff in that way. I do know that the rankings are different this year. That's one thing I guess I could have talked about off the top. It's supposed to be like truly how you rank in 1 through 12, I guess it is. That'll be interesting to see. Does that really matter? Does that affect a lot? Instead of it being those like 4 spots, even when you have a team that may be ranked a good bit lower, we're going to see. But I at least think that Georgia does get into the playoffs. I think they're SEC champions once again, winning when it matters most. Very excited about that. Hope that can come true for sure. That's kind of what I have on the season. I got Georgia there at that point, 12-1, going to the college football playoffs. We're going to see once we get to that point if Georgia can kind of keep that going. There's a few other teams out throughout the season that I think are really going to be vying for that college football playoff spots, obviously in the national championship light as well. And there's a couple of teams in particular that I think could pose a bigger issue. It's all going to depend on how it lines up in the playoffs, whether or not I think Georgia can kind of get that done. And I know that sounds silly. You should think, hey, this team can beat anybody, and very well possible. Potentially that could happen, but I think sometimes you get a better matchup in those playoffs, and that could be the difference in winning a national championship this year and not. But I do have Georgia 12-1 SEC champions, the only loss regular season to Texas at home, kind of ending that. Don't want to make that a sad note, but that's just kind of what I have. So impact players I think that are going to be coming into this season. There's a lot. There's a lot of guys that I could talk about that have already been on this team. There's some transfers that are coming in that I think might potentially be really good. You've heard things here and there like Zachariah Branch and a couple of these other guys who have come in that are really lighting things up. But there's a couple of freshmen that I've heard a little bit about too. And I think they're going to be some standout guys this season as well. One of them being a running back in Bo Walker. Another one in Elijah Griffin. I think he's a dude. I've heard him actually compared to a Jalen Carter. That's a pretty doggone good comparison to have if you're going to have one being compared to Jalen. So that's awesome to me. We'll see if those guys are. Those are 2 names that I'm just going to put out there and say, hey, these are 2 guys that I think could potentially be standout guys this season, really making a name for themselves as freshmen. And we're going to have to lean on that. There's going to be quite a few guys that even as freshmen, they're going to have to step up and be elite, and I look forward to seeing what they're going to do. Some of the transfers I think that are also going to make an immediate impact coming into the game. Noah Thomas from Texas A&M there at the wide receiver spot. I think he's going to be a big one. Obviously, I said it a minute ago, and Zachariah Branch coming from USC. Also, Josh McCray, a running back there out of Illinois. I think that's going to be good, which kind of leads me to the next point that I kind of want to talk about. Something that it's going to take for Georgia to win these games, like I've talked about, to get to an SEC championship game, to hopefully win that and move on into the college football playoffs. Georgia has to run the football better. I think everybody kind of knows that, and this is a conversation I've heard a lot of other people have, but it's very, very true. We have to take steps forward in 2025 if Georgia plans on, one, winning a lot of games, getting into these playoff positions and all, but we got to take steps forward. Here's the deal, though. I think Georgia's running back room is even better this year than it was last year. Even better this year than it was last year. Got to stay healthy. That's probably a big one. But we come into the season healthy. Knocking on wood again, just saying. But this should be able to happen as far as taking that step forward in 2025 because of this room. We've lost quite a few guys on the offensive line. Obviously, get a few of them drafted from this past season. But I still think we can be elite this year and take that step forward. Your running back room looks like this, just to name a few. You still got Roderick Robinson. You got Josh McCray. You still got Nate Frazier, who was a guy that stood out last year. Dwight Phillips is there as well. Bo Walker, which I talked about. You got Micah Bell, Gannon Hurst, Cash Jones is still there, and even Chauncey Bowens. I can't remember how you say his last name now. And there's a few other guys that are in there too that I didn't necessarily mention, but just those names alone, a lot of those names you've already heard before. You heard them last season, and even like a Cash that you've heard for the last 12 years. But you got quite a few guys on there that I think are really going to make an impact this season. O-line really has to help that out. Again, we're leaning on a few guys here this year, but I think it's going to be, I'm not going to say it's necessarily going to be improved, but I think the O-line can do a lot of things to be able to make things work for this running back room. Couple of other rooms I want to talk about is the wide receiver room. I think that this year is a great opportunity for Gunner to be able to lock in with a couple of these guys. You know, one of the biggest things last season that we talked about week in and week out was always dropping the football. Couldn't stand it. That's something that, to be honest with you, I don't want to see that this year. I really don't. And I'm not necessarily saying that we will, but I feel like we have a great wide receiver room for Gunner to be able to throw to this year. Again, naming a few here for you. You got Zachariah Branch. You got Noah Thomas, who's coming in. A couple of guys that transfer that I think are to be really good. You got CJ Wiley. Here's a big one. Here's a big one that came back after what was going on last year is Colby Young, a guy who, when he was playing early in the season, he was catching the football. He was making great plays. Obviously has to leave the team for a little while due to a suspension and some other things that we're not going to speculate on, but he is back with the team now. I think he has the potential to be a very, very good and standout running back or wide receiver, for Georgia this season. You still got deep breath here. Still got London Humphreys there. Sakovi White, I think, could have a breakout season this year. And here's one name that I'm very, very excited to get to see again this year. Again, because some of this is just the fact that we've got a guy in this who's been in this system for a long time. He knows it. He's done a lot of different things in this system. And I think he has that veteranness to be able to kind of pass along to other guys who haven't necessarily been on this same page all season. That's Dylan Bell. Very excited to see what Dylan can do this year. Obviously, our tight end room, you got Oscar Delp, Lawson Lucky, you got Elias Williams, and then Jaden Riddell as well. Some big names there in your tight end room. And Oscar and Lawson, I think, can have big seasons this year. Blocking, obviously big, but making big plays too as well with their hands. So that's really all I've got kind of getting into what we're going to get into this season. Really excited to see what this team's going to do. Again, I think this team can be really good. I have high expectations, as most all of us do, for what this team is going to do moving forward. I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do. I'm excited for it. Can't believe college football is already here. Looking forward to next week doing absolutely nothing. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even Monday, watching football all weekend long. Going to do it this Saturday, too. We're going to talk here in just a minute about some of these games that are coming up even this week in what we call week 0 when you do have some, because there is at least one that is a ranked matchup, which is really exciting to me to actually get a game in week 0 that's ranked instead of having some of these other games that you don't really care about, which some of them you don't, but hey, it's football. We're all going to watch it. If you're a football fan, you're watching college football this weekend, but excited to see what Georgia's going to do. That's at least what I have in previewing them before we come into the season. I'll kind of talk about some other stuff here as we wrap up after we talk about these games around the country on what else we got coming down the line for this season. But some of the games around the country, you got Fresno State and Kansas playing at 6:30 on Saturday. These games that I'm talking about here are all on Saturday. Stanford at Hawaii or versus Hawaii. I think it's at Hawaii. 7:30. That's on CBS. What a team to get to play for. How awesome would it be? Like, yeah, hey, I'm gonna go play college football at Hawaii, and you travel literally every away game is a long trip. So that'll be kind of fun to get to watch that night. But your ranked matchup is number 22 Iowa State versus number 17 Kansas State. You get that one at 12 o'clock. So we get that. What do you call it? We get the, what do you call it? Psh. You get game day. You get to watch whatever you want to watch. SEC Nation as we get, well, I guess you're really not going to watch SEC Nation because there's not a game. But there'll be game day. We'll at least watch that, check it out, see what they got going on before that game. Get a fun matchup here in week 0 to be able to watch. Here is kind of what I'm thinking for this season. I've talked about it a little bit. I think I put a video out early on my expectations for what we're going to do moving forward. And this is what it is. I'm going to come to you guys again Sunday. So generally what I'm going to do is I'm going to record an episode on Sunday. You guys really won't get it until Monday because sometimes I'll record it earlier on a Sunday and I let it out and it gets out, the end of the day Sunday. And if that happens, cool. That one's not going to be live. That's just one where I kind of recap the episode and really the game before and games around the country as well. We'll kind of recap all that stuff on Sunday. Most of the time you'll get that either late Sunday into Monday. But Thursday is the big one that I'm going to kind of push because what I want to be able to do on those Thursday nights, generally probably starting 8:30, 9 o'clock, I'll nail that down next week. Really, I won't nail it down next week. It'll be the week after. For the call-in show, where we're going to do live on YouTube as we're doing today. But you'll have the opportunity. You can call into the show. Any kind of opinions you have, whatever it is that we're talking about at the time, we're going to talk about those things. And you got an opportunity to be able to call in and talk about whatever you want to talk about. It's going to be like Paul, except for not at all in any shape, form, or fashion, mainly because I'm not Paul and I'm doing this by myself. So it's going to be a little bit tougher than that, but we're going to try to make some things work. I'm excited for it, at least. Again, excited for the season that we have coming up, excited for what all we can do on this network as well. If you guys have made it to the end of this, if you guys have watched or gone back and watched the live on YouTube, I greatly appreciate it. If you guys don't mind, hit that thumbs up. If you're not subscribed already, subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. And if you want to find this on another platform, you don't necessarily want to watch all of it or what have you, check it out. Any podcast format, it doesn't matter. Apple, Spotify, all the places you can find it, Google, iHeartRadio. This podcast is on all of those channels, and you guys can go listen if you'd rather listen than watch. Either which way, I appreciate it. I greatly appreciate all of you guys being here, and I look forward to the Dogs getting back on the field in very, very short amount of time. We only have one more week coming up this weekend. Oh yeah, let me just go ahead and tell you guys this now because I'm about to forget about it. I won't be here next Thursday. So how in the world am I going to have the first week of the season with the call-in show and everything, and I'm not even going to be here to do the call-in show? We'll figure it out. I'm going to come to you guys Sunday. We're going to wrap up some of these other games that did happen. We're going to kind of start getting geared towards what we're thinking for this week coming into the season, that week one. And then I'll decide kind of how we're going to do things, whether it's going to be a late night Wednesday. The only problem is if it's Wednesday, it's going to be a late night, like late, possibly 9:30. Starting for that. And I don't necessarily want to push it too late because I know, hey, it's a school week. Everybody's trying to get to bed. They got kids and stuff they want to take to school the next day. But we'll figure it out. More than likely won't come to you guys that Thursday. Probably record that one late Wednesday night, get it out to you guys Thursday, whether you want to watch it on YouTube or listen. And then the week following that'll start up our call-in show. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited for that time. But other than that, we'll check in with you guys later on. Go Dogs.
How about them dogs? Go dogs!